to this foolishness. So I saw this article and I was like, child, I got to come in and we got to talk about it. So y'all already know, because we've talked about Craven the Hunter on the show. We've talked about Madam Web. We talked about um Morbius. We talked about all the shitty movies that have come out of the Sony Spider-Man multiverse, which none of the movies have Spider-Man in it, but they feel like we got to mention Spider-Man just so y'all know that there's some sort of connection, which there was never any connection. But they think just mentioning Spider-Man and Peter Parker, then that's enough because the IP of Spider-Man is pretty much in between Marvel and Sony, and they got their own little thing going on with Tom Holland. I know it's a lot. I'm irritated by it, but that's their thing, and that's what it is. So, instead of the CEO, and it's funny how, like, CEOs seem to be the ongoing thing now between the one that was over at that United Healthcare mess, and now we got this clueless CEO over here making these comments. And it's like, you know what, with these type of comments, this is why y'all will continue to lose money at the box office because of stupidity that comes out of these people's mouths. So Tony Vinciquerra, who is the CEO at Sony Pictures, instead of him saying, you know what, maybe Craven didn't work because we didn't really value the source material. We really didn't hire people who understood the lore of a Craven the Hunter or a Madam Web or a Morbius. Or maybe that you can't take villains that you need Spider-Man to go up against and turn them into anti-heroes slash heroes. What are they? Like, you can't create an IP or or a franchise off of a person who is a a Spider-Man villain or an anti-hero, whatever the hell you want to call it, and give them their own little movie, and people are just going to show up, especially if you're not really putting people who understand how this whole world works. Maybe we did something bad. Maybe we need to look at the drawing board and figure out what we need to do to get butts back in seats and the trust of the audience to come in and see what we're doing, that we actually care about the audience. We care about these IPs, and we want to give you a good film. But why would he do that? Instead, these movies come out, they put out shitty films. We go and see it because we don't have the control of what's going on in the studios. We're not the ones who's making the executive decisions. All we as a public can do is when these movies come out, we go to the theater, we go and watch it. And then if we watch it, we either like it or we don't. And I'm sure there's people out there, God bless you if you do, that like Madam Web, that like Morbius, that like all the Venom movies. I don't like any of them. I didn't like Madam Web. I did not like Venom. I was like, and I've said this before, Tom Hardy's performance as Eddie in the Venom, on point. Nobody's taking that away from him. Like, he could, first of all, him and Aaron Taylor Johnson, two actors who literally can step in any film, regardless of how bad it is, and make it work. I'm not going to take away from them because that's how good of an actor that they are. But when they're in a movie that's just trash and they're the only one who showed up and clocked in and came to do what needed to be done, cashed their check and went the fuck home, I can't blame them too much. I'm blaming the CEOs because that's not their fault. They just came in to do the job that was required of them, and then they just went about their business. Now, all the other moving parts behind the scenes, that's up to the director, the screenwriter, the CEOs who made the decision to give them the money, the budget, and was like, okay, this script is good, let's get it going. And when they do all of that, then that's great. But here's the thing. Now, he went and said that instead of taking it all their fault, it's our fault. Critics, and those of y'all at home that went to see this movie and hated it, it's your fault, it's our fault, because I guess I'm included in that when I give my reviews of movies, that these movies flopped. So Vincent Chiara recently told the LA Times that Kraven the Hunter is probably the worst launch we had in the nearly 8 years he's been in the studio, adding, I still don't understand because the film is not a bad film. Really? Did you actually watch it? Now, Craven opened in theaters on December 13th to a paltry $11 million, the lowest debut yet for a Sony-released Marvel movie. The movie's current domestic box office total stands at just $18 million. Damn. With its global haul is $43 million. Now, did it say what the budget was for this film? Because I believe that Craven's budget is about $100 million. And so far, this is bad. Like, you only brought in so far $43 million globally. In America, you only made 18 million. So in 2 weeks, your box office was $7 million on week 2, and it had a huge, significant drop at the box office. And it's critics' fault. So they said these are more or less catastrophic results for a Superman movie to cap off a lackluster year for Sony comic book movies after Madam Web flopped with 100 million worldwide and Venom: The Last Dance becoming the franchise's lowest growing entry. Now, I will say this: Venom: The Last Dance did make money. It turned a profit, I guess. It crossed over to about $400 million. So good on them, even though it was the lowest number. And you could definitely see at this point that while Tom Hardy definitely does his thing in as Venom and Eddie, the Venom movies as a whole are not great. I've never thought that, in my opinion, any of those movies are great. I know some people but I had a great time with the character. And that's great. You can go on this journey and have a great time with the character, but the movies as a whole are just not good outside of Tom Hardy's performance in those movies. So it says, let's just touch on Madam Web for a moment. Now, Vincent Chiara said, Madam Web underperformed in the theaters because the press just crucified it. It was not a bad film, and it did great on Netflix. For some reason, the press decided that they didn't want us to making these films out of Craven and Madam Web, and the critics just destroyed them. They also did it with Venom, but the audience loved Venom and made Venom a massive hit. These are not terrible films. They were just destroyed by the critics and the press for some reason. Now, if Out of Touch was a person, it would be this Vincent Chiara guy. Because I'm like, oh, wait, hold on. Let's put his damn picture up so y'all know who the hell I'm talking about. This old Out of Touch heifer. Yeah, there he is. Why he look like Bob Chapek? Like, they all got a distinct look over there at, well, and Bob Chapek been fired. But also, I'm hearing that this guy is actually on his way out. So maybe this is why he's saying all this, because you know what? He's been putting out a lot of shitty movies. He was the one that was greenlighting a lot of these bad movies, not probably understanding how these things work. And this is what irritates me about these movies, that the movies are not being created by artists anymore. It's being greenlit and pushed through by shareholders, people who think that, oh, all they care about is their little bottom line, their money, and their bonuses. And maybe that's why he's pissed. I think he's pissed because he's not getting his bonus. His bonus is not going to be as big as it was prior. And I'm hearing that he's actually on his way out as CEO. So they're going to usher somebody in new. Now let's go back and touch on what he said. He said Madam Web underperformed because the press crucified it. No, Madam Web underperformed because it was not a good movie. That's just plain and simple. He said it was not a bad film, but it wasn't a good one either. But this is where he contradicts himself. He said the press decided that they didn't want us making these films out of Craven and Madam Web. I didn't hear anything about critics saying that why are they making a Craven movie? Why are they making a Madam Web movie? I've heard people saying that they hope the movies are good. I'll even go on the record and say that there's one particular I could bring up, John Campea over at his show, and I watch his show a lot. He's been the one that I don't know, kudos to him. He was the only one that I know that was championing hard for Craven the Hunter to succeed. Even though I looked at that movie, I'm like, this is going to be a piece of shit and it's going to flop. Even at an 8-minute opening sequence that you could tell was heavily edited, because that wasn't a full 8-minute clip. Because there was a hard edit up in there that I was like, okay, there's a piece of this missing. Like, that wasn't like the full scene. But anyway, with that nitpick notwithstanding, watching the opening sequence or whatever, I was like, okay, it's not bad. Like, based on what I'm seeing so far, it doesn't look like a bad movie. It's entertaining, even though I feel like I've seen this scene in another film, a far more better made movie. But based over this scene and Aaron Taylor Johnson doing the action stuff and the accent and all that other stuff, I'm like, okay, this doesn't look bad. And then the reviews came out, and then the fans came out and was like, God, this movie is terrible. Like, it's not just them. And then this was the kicker. When he went and compared, Madam Web did well on Netflix. Like, since when is Netflix the litmus test for what is good and what is bad? Because quiet as it's kept, Netflix stays putting out a lot of shit. Go through their list of movies up there. It is slim pickings when it comes to finding a good one. If we did find a good one, we're going to talk about it next when we talk about Carry On. Because that was one of the rare ones that's actually good to come out of the sea of shit. So we're not going to sit up here and compare, oh, but Madam Web did well on Netflix, but it flopped in the movies. Why is that? Because Netflix doesn't cost people that much to subscribe to. Anybody can sit at home on Netflix and just watch a movie and just have it on. So how was that how was Netflix the litmus test of what's great? There's a lot of bad movies that are on Netflix that and I don't even know how they tally up their numbers and stuff over there. That's still a mystery. But those numbers, I guess I don't know how all that works. But I see like in the charting list that those, this is what's one, number two, number three, number four. Like we see the list how they do all that stuff up there, and I'm like, okay, whatever. But Madam Web going number one on Netflix is not the all of a sudden this big thing. Oh yeah, because Netflix says it's great. We'll go with it because it said it's number one. But you do forget that, there are a lot of people out here for some reason. I mean, if like even if you do like I'll use this for an example. You can do something. I always try to find a silver lining and stuff whenever I talk about movies. Before, when I was younger and I didn't really know no better until I started when I went to film school and stuff, it'd be so easy to sit up here and just crap all over movies and say, oh, it's a piece of da, and watch your numbers just skyrocket because people love to watch critics shit on a movie. They do. And the numbers will go higher versus if you go and sit around and just be like, you know what, I see the silver lining, I see what they were doing, and this is this, and this, and you do all the pointing out. That may not get not so great numbers. But for the most part, negativity sells. So therefore, it'd be easy for everybody to just sit up here and crap on a movie. But if a movie is bad, just take the L and realize, okay, so if these movies are not doing really well, what went wrong? And I really feel like by the time we got The Craven, fans were so pissed off at Sony for consistently releasing a lot of crappy live action movies, from Morbius to some the Venoms just being okay, to Madam Web being terrible, to now Craven being the worst out of all of them. I just think by the time we got The Craven, people were just like, you know what, I'm done. Like I'm not giving credence to Sony anymore. I'm not giving them no more chances. I'm gonna just thug it on out for their animated stuff. And that's the positive in all of this. Thank you, Brain, for reminding me. The animated stuff, like Into the Spider-Verse and all that other stuff, those movies, how is it that those are better than your live action movies? That's what I don't get. So while he doesn't believe Marvel's Sony movies are terrible, critics would disagree because Madam Web holds an 11% on Rotten Tomatoes, while Craven didn't perform much better with reviews and had a 15% Rotten Tomatoes score. Now, I should say, in addition to Madam Web and Craven, Sony also earned negative reviews and bad box office with his Jared Leto starring Morbius movie. Yeah, I saw that in the theater, and I still don't know what the hell that movie's about. Sony insiders acknowledged to Variety earlier this month that Craven, Madam Web and Morbius were creative and critical duds, even if they also can insist that Morbius, which made 167.4 million globally, did turn a profit. And that's another thing, too, that should be pointed out, that regardless of how you feel about some of these movies, Morbius did turn a profit. Venom did turn a profit. So they made a little money, not enough to garner a sequel, but they turned a profit nonetheless. Now, moving forward, they said the studio would need to be more discerning about which, if any, of the studio's stable of Spider-Man characters should be elevated into their own movie franchise. Now, Sony is currently working with Disney's Marvel Studios on a fourth Spider-Man movie set to star Tom Holland. Head over to the LA Times website, and they said that basically they have, like, in the LA Times, if you want to read the whole full profile in its entirety, you can go over there and read that. But yeah, we don't need to, because the main story here is to talk about this foolishness that he's out here spewing. So it just goes to show, you know what, Tony, you are out of touch. I'm glad you're on the way out. And I feel like that what Sony needs at this point, they need their own Kevin Feige or their own James Gunn, because Kevin Feige is someone who has been able to, steer the ship of Marvel notwithstanding of what Bob Chapek did to him and pulled back the reins a bit, and which is why we've seen a couple of the MCU verses suffer a bit because he pulled some rank away from Kevin Feige, and now that he got the reins back because Bob Iger came back in and gave him the full, thing of what he needed to do, now they're steering the ship in the right direction, I hope. But now, looking at DCU, when they announced James Gunn and Peter Safran's handling more of the business stuff. James Gunn is handling more of the creative stuff. James Gunn is a through and through comic book nerd. He understands the nuances and all the intricacies. That word is always a tongue twister for me to say. All the intricacies, but when you got to say it fast, of comic book stuff. So, like, even when you look at the Superman trailer, you see all the little things in there. It's like, okay, he's pulling things literally from the comic books and all these other things that's going on, which is why I trust in what he's doing. And plus, James Gunn's track record in Hollywood in regards of things he's written, things he's produced, and things he's directed speaks for itself. So that's why I trust in what he's doing. So Sony needs their own Kevin Feige, and they need their own James Gunn over there, someone who knows what the hell they're doing, somebody who understands the whole comic book world and is not just thinking, okay, it's a comic book thing. We're just going to not follow the source material, and we're just going to come up with a bunch of stuff. And even I don't know what the hell's going on in this thing. Yeah, go ahead, make the movie, make it work. I don't care. And let's see if people show up. And then when they don't show up, then it's our fault. It's like, no, give us a good movie with some quality and people that we care about, we could root for, some really cool action sequences, and you follow the damn source material, maybe people will actually show up and see your movie. You can't just sit and think that, I'm going to do a superhero thing, put some people in it, and then we're just going to have really flashy action sequences, and then people are actually going to show up and just see a movie that you made in the theater and think that's enough, because that's not how it works, sir. So if you don't understand how movie making works, maybe you need to step your little CEO ass to the side and let somebody who knows what the hell they doing coming to do the job. But like I said before, word on the curb is he's on his way out. So the next person they bring in, hopefully they know what the hell they doing over there at Sony, and they can give us some damn quality superhero live action movies for once. So I say all this to say, what do y'all think of this story in regards of the Sony Pictures CEO blaming the failure of Craven and Madam Web on movie critics and the fans? Because he tried to say at one point it was the critics' fault, and he blamed the fan. So it was like you were gaslighting. He was trying to gaslight and blame everybody except for himself over the fact that you are the man at the top who's making the decisions. So maybe these movies are flopping because you don't know what the hell you're doing over there. So let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below.